I started writing in disciplined fashion about a little over 7 years ago. I was on a long hiatus from school. I had my daughter, and I decided to go back to college. And before I had left school, I was a journalist. I majored in journalism. And so when I got back, I took an intro to poetry class with my now mentor, Mary Moffett. And it was my introductory class to poetry, and I fell in love with it. And on the syllabus, it required that I attend a reading and actually participate as a reader. So I took one of my very first poems that I had ever written in an academic setting and read it. And I was invited to go to a slam, which was called Poetry and Beer, hosted by Don McIver at the time. And I attended, and I became hooked ever since. And so slam poetry was really what retained my interest and dedication and passion to be a creative writer, specifically a poet. And so I changed my major from journalism and switched over to creative writing and communication studies. And then I've been pursuing poetry ever since. And opportunities have been abundant through the spoken word community here in Albuquerque. Oh my gosh, my all-time favorite writer is Sharon Olds, because I didn't believe a woman could speak as unabashedly as she did and does about the female experience, whether that be a mother, a daughter, a family member, a sexual and feminine being, a fierce feminist. I have many other favorite writers like Sandra Cisneros. I love Tony Hoagland for his wordplay, and I think he's phenomenally intellectual, but retains his humor, and that's pretty rare. And so I love Tony Hoagland. There's so many slam poets. I would speak of Marty McConnell, Rachel McKibbins, Tristan Silverman, Anise Mujani, Tara Hardy. Let's see. There's a lot to name. It's hard to think of all of them. If I say one, I want to say like 10 or 20, but I'll stop there. Okay. It's a real life writing process. I multitask a lot. I have a young daughter, and I'm always commuting to different schools to teach in the classroom, poetry usually, or working on facilitating workshops or whatnot. So I'm always on the go. So, I write on paper, I write on napkins, I write at my desk when I can. I really value a writing space in my home, so I try to make sure that it's sustainable. I created my office so that I can produce work there. That's my favorite place to write. It doesn't always happen. I write on my laptop. I definitely don't do this though. A lot of artists will record their ideas or poems, and I commend them because I can't do it. I think of them sometimes when I'm sleeping, but then I forget about them in the morning. So maybe I should try it. I don't know why I don't do it, because I know a lot of people get a lot of material by doing that. I don't. I need to write it down. I need to see what it looks like configured on paper and or on a screen on a laptop or a PC or something like that. So okay. I think you can have writer's block in a sense. People say writer's block doesn't exist, but for somebody who's going through it, yes, it does. Or at least it feels real at the time. To get over that hump, I usually realize I just need to start reading again some poetry. I'm always reading something, whether it be nonfiction or fiction, short stories, a collection of poetry. I always have books on my nightstand so I can read, even if it's just writing on craft, on creating. But if I tend to read a whole lot more in whatever genre it is I'm wanting to write in, that's helpful to get over writer's block. And so writer's block happens, I think, when we just, we stuff too many things in our schedule. And so we have a lot of noise going on in our head. It's like a traffic jam of thoughts. And so really, it's just finding your thoughts are in there. Your creative spark is still in there. You just need to unravel all the other stuff, all the miscellanea things that distract us so often. So if you can sit down, and for me anyhow, whenever I read other poems, for instance, I usually will get into a place where I can write again. I feel creatively, free again to write. No, I didn't, and that's a great question that Rich asked. I did it, and I often tell this stories, especially a story when I teach young students.
I was going to ask what affected you as a writer.
Yeah,
As a teacher.
I didn't read a lot of poetry growing up, but I did enjoy reading a lot growing up. I've always been an avid reader, but I didn't really tend to look towards poetry to read. And in the schools, in the halls of academia, I didn't like the poetry that was given me to read. You know, a lot of it was like classical poetry. I did like Shakespeare. They were long plays. I didn't realize that, you know, these are very poetic plays. I liked the plot and all the characters and whatnot. I didn't understand poetry. It wasn't presented in a way that was accessible to me. I think teachers sometimes still struggle with conveying the true intent of poetry in the classroom, and that's why they bring poets into the schools, like myself, like Manuel Gonzalez, like Hakeem Bellamy, like Jasmine Senekafi, amongst many across the nation, especially slam poets, mind you, the spoken word artists. But because sometimes it's a weird animal, and so as a young person, I didn't understand poetry. I didn't realize I was also creating poetry though. I was very much into rap and hip hop, and I would create my own raps, my diss raps, and diss people down the street. This is not a lie. This really happened. I know some of them still, and I'm not going to rap them for you because they're embarrassing. But if I had a crush on somebody, I didn't like them, I would rap about them, me and my cousins, and we'd call them up and rap and hang up and stuff like that. Those are poems,
Yeah,
you know.
they are.
So, yes.
What reaction do you get? If they're people like, I mean,
If they're other writers, they're like,
I was like, people who know who you are would expect that, but I mean, I remember when I used to wait tables and people would ask, you know, what do you do? And I'd be like, I'm a writer, and they'd be like, can I have the check? You know, like, it just had people, you know.
You know what? I think it's a thing. Yeah, I used to not say I was a writer when I first started. I didn't identify as a writer, and I also waited tables when I went back to school, almost a decade ago. And it took a few years to identify. So I could self-identify as a writer. I would say the first couple of years, even though I was on slam teams, I was, performing out of state. I was hosting workshops. I still didn't identify. It took me a while to do that. Now I do, because that is exactly what I do. Yeah. I am a writer, but I can say that comfortably now. It took a while.
Okay.
Don't give up. Especially if you have aspirations to create an online journal. You are much needed, and it does take time, and there are many headaches sometimes where you just want to throw in the towel because you don't think enough people are cooperating, or don't they get it? This is a sensational idea. What's wrong with them? Why aren't they submitting? It has nothing to do with you. It's not personal. I think that as long as you keep on creating, cultural pieces like this and opportunities for writers, it will happen. And it will happen in due time, as long as you have diligence, and that's your true passion, which I know it is. And for those people who are just writers and don't want to, not writers/organizers of venues or workshops or online magazines, still nonetheless, don't give up and read a lot. I think too often there's some young writers who really want to emulate some of these performance poets that they see, but they don't want to do any of the heart work, which is reading poetry. Especially if you don't understand it at first. There's an aversion like, oh, I don't know, I don't get that surrealism. Start with Billy Collins, or something like that. But just don't give up. It pays out.
Yes.
And I don't mean monetarily.
Yeah.
I think in any line of work, you're going to have a situation sooner or later where you disagree on something with somebody or a group of people. I can go back to the good old-fashioned rejection letter, and sometimes I don't understand why, some of my pieces didn't get accepted, but it comes with the territory. Just like a spoken word poet doesn't always win the slam. You live to slam another day. That being said, sometimes when you're on the other side and you're organizing with a large group of people, you've got very powerful yet very contrasting personalities, and you have to learn how to collaborate. What I'm doing right now with La Palabra, the word is a woman, is a collective of women writers that come from all kinds of backgrounds. Not only are they just writers, but they're educators, they're artisans, you know, they're painters, they're singers here. You know, we have a lot of similarities, but we also have a lot of differences. We're different ages, different, you know, different races, you know, we're different sizes, but we're coming together in a communal effort to create something larger than ourselves. It's a collective. You know, it doesn't always happen that you agree on the direction of something, but that's where it really challenges you to even look at yourself and say, well, what do I need to do to meet in the middle to make this thing that's bigger than us and that's worth it for the community happen? You know, so if there is negative feedback, you know, at least let it be constructive feedback. At least make sure you're a person to, you know, say something constructive versus I don't like that or I don't like you. Don't make it personal. Don't take things personal, and by all means, don't say anything that's going to personally offend somebody on a personal level. You know, that rarely happens, but it does happen. I actually just had a conversation with the fellow slam poet, a female slam poet, and she said that did happen to her. And we actually had a conversation about it. How did she react to it? And I said, well, you know what? At least you're getting a reaction, you know, and that person came to you and said that to you versus maybe slandering you in a different environment. You know, you incited a reaction with your poem. And so you have to take it that way. I know it's kind of like the glass half full or half empty, but that's gonna happen. Oh, I know, I have a good example. There's a poem I have called My Aging Face, and I wrote it right after I had my daughter Mia, who's 9 now. So I know it was about 2 or 3 years after she was born, and you know, I was just kind of looking into the future as I aged, and also my body was different after I had my child, and I wrote this poem. I've been getting flack for it ever since by older women. And that's okay. When that happens, you know, it catches me off guard. Sometimes it happens right after I perform the poem. Oh. Or it recently actually did get brought up, and I'm like, wow, I haven't performed that poem in years. Who's she to say those things? Yeah. She isn't, you know, in her 50s. She's in her early 30s or late 20s when she was, meaning me, I'm talking about myself in third person, when she did this poem, My Aging Face. Who is she to talk about such issues when she looks so young or at least is perceived to be so young? Well, we're all gonna age. That's my take on it, you know, but I have to explain that to the person. I just take the time and then I explain it. Well, this is where that poem comes from. But yeah, it kind of comes at me in a combative way. Yeah. That I will say, it has. Yeah. For that particular poem.
Okay.
Shebang.
Shebang.
How does it affect me? You know, that's such a hard question to answer because it's not like I've always been identified as, you know, a female artist, and before then as somebody that was pretty vocal as a female. So, you know, West End Press, my book, Always Messing with Them Boys, was published by West End Press, and their mission statement is to, you know, publish female writers, as well as blue-collar workers or that come from that background, or authors that might be first-generation college attendees, you know, things like that. And so, luckily, there is that opportunity that people are creating that space. And so as a female writer who also aligns with all those other things, I was able to get published through West End Press. Maybe if I went to a different press and was in a wider, larger pool where males are predominantly published, I would have had a slim chance getting that manuscript published. So I went to where I had this opportunity to do so. Well, I just competed in Denver at the Women of the World Poetry Slam Championship, and there were close to 80 women from across the nation there. That was awesome because the topics there were not the topics that you find often at a national event where there are teams competing and it's male and female. Here there were a lot of topics focused on issues that relate directly to women, queer women, transgender woman, African American woman, Chicana woman, Asian American woman, but it was all female centric, and it was refreshing. It felt like I could talk about these issues. I could hear about these issues in a safe environment. And when I say safe, I mean uncensored, lack of judgment. There was a lot of, you could relate to all the topics that were being spoken about in the form of poetry. And it was nice that was happening. And I was really glad to be a part of it. So I will continue to attend WOW in the future years, whether I compete or not, because I think it's a really necessary community. In fact, there's a forum that was created online through Facebook called Women of Slam. And I'm not sure what woman or what group of women started it, but there's over 100 women on that Facebook page, I think. And they talk about everything about how to be safe in a poetry venue that might be either a bar or a coffee shop, how to, watch out for yourself and for others, amongst all kinds of stuff on there. And I think that's really great that produced that Facebook page, that group page.